This video will explore and clarify the traditional use of the cadential 6/4 chord. The cadential 6/4 chord is a concept that is typically taught in the first year of a music theory sequence, but is notoriously misunderstood and is confused by having several accepted notation systems. If you recall, the 6/4 in a chord is from the figured bass system of notation, where the number correlates to the intervals within the key above a given bass note. We understand that a chord with a 6 in it is a code for a first inversion triad. Here's E in the bass, here's the 6th above it, notating a C major chord. A 6/4 chord we understand as a second inversion chord with the G in the bass, 6, 4. Still gives me a C major chord, but with a G in the bass. Notice the interval of a 6th and a 4th. Most of the time, we reserve the use of 6/4 chords for passing because of the unstable nature of the chord. Here's a classic example. Here's C major to 4. I keep the C in the bass. I can go right back to 1. And really, this 4 chord is extremely unstable, but it's okay because we resolve it. Notice that this progression, here's 5 to 1, 6, 4. Even though that's a 1, 6, 4 chord and technically tonic, it sounds incomplete and as if it needs to move. Because of this, final cadences traditionally end with a tonic chord in the root position. Here it is again. 1, 4, 5, 1 in root position. With the 1, 6, 4 chord, notice that the dominant is in the bass and has a strong pull to the tonic. This chord loves to move with the 6 resolving down to the 5 and the 4 resolving down to 3, as if they were suspensions above the bass. Notice that once I move the chords down, I'm playing a root position dominant chord that loves to resolve to 1. This progression with the suspensions above the dominant in a cadential passage happens so often in traditional harmony that we have given it its own special name, cadential 6/4. The confusion is ultimately around the notation of the sequence and its overall function. As this chord is really a 1, 6, 4 chord, it could be notated like this. However, because this chord doesn't actually sound tonic and rather sounds like a suspension above the dominant, in other words, wrong notes create tension, it wouldn't make sense to label this as a tonic 1 chord, as it doesn't function like that at all. So we designate this whole sequence as a prolongation of the dominant and label it like this. Now, because this is really just a prolongation or extension of the 5 chord, we could also think of this whole sequence as a big 5 chord with a suspension and an extension and label it this way. Because this is hard to type and doesn't allow for a symbol under every chord, many textbooks will print it this way, 5, 6, 4 to 5, and expect you as trained musician to know that this is a suspension and not an actual 5, 6, 4 chord in second inversion, which would be this. All 3 of these labels are perfectly acceptable. The only one that is not accurate is the 1, 6, 4 to 5 label without the dominant under it, as this is not accurate to describe what is really happening. Plus, it is rare for a composer to stick to the rules completely, and they will deliberately create variations and other suspensions and anticipations to mix it up. As always, I recommend exploring this at the piano in all keys to fully hear and understand the function of the cadential 6/4 patterns.